Good afternoon, everyone. There you go. Okay. Welcome to the College of Humanities and Social Sciences Summit on Human-Centered AI, Bridging Humanities, Social Sciences, and Technology. I'm Ann Artis. I have the pleasure and the privilege of serving as dean of this college. So thank you, one and all, for joining us today. Our audience includes members of our college's advisory boards, faculty and staff affiliated with our academic units and research centers, and university leadership, at least for the moment. Amarta, don't leave yet. It also includes committed volunteers, distinguished alumni award recipients, longtime supporters, and community members. All of you work in a vast array of industries in and beyond the DMV, and you share a commitment of service to George Mason University and to lifelong learning. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today as we cultivate a space for us to meet as leaders in our sets of communities, to learn from each other, and to start a conversation that we hope will pique interest, curiosity, enhance understanding, and bring us closer in community together. Artificial intelligence is, I don't have to say this to you, but I'm going to say it anyway, reshaping our world in profound ways, transforming industries, societies, and the way we live and work. In this rapidly changing landscape, one crucial question stands out, at least for me, and is the occasion for today's event. How do we ensure that AI serves humanity? The answer lies in part within the humanities and social sciences as disciplines and the transformative research and innovations in teaching that are taking place within our college. Our disciplines, rooted in understanding cultures, societies, and human behavior, are uniquely positioned to guide AI development in directions that are human-centered, responsible, ethical, and fair. Today's faculty and graduate student showcase is designed to give you a glimpse, really just a glimpse, into how faculty work and graduate student research and education in the humanities and social sciences is informing and enhancing the development of AI technologies that help humans achieve their full potential. Help humans achieve their full potential. Before I turn the podium over to Mohammed Salama, the college's Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs, who will explain the format of today's event and introduce each of our speakers, I'd like to ask Amardu Shehu, Lisa Brelia, did she leave? Where is she? To stand? And Marguerite Rippey to stand briefly to be recognized. Amarda is George Mason's inaugural Vice President and Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer, and in that role leads strategy and implementation of AI across research, academics, and partnerships for the university. Earlier this year, Amarda invited Lisa, the college's Senior Associate Dean for Undergraduate Academic Affairs, and Marguerite, the college's Associate Dean for Graduate Academic Affairs, to serve on the university-level Curriculum Innovation Working Group. Amarda, I take this opportunity to thank you for your visionary leadership in this dimension of George Mason's future-facing work. We are truly delighted you're able to join us, even if only briefly, for today's Human-Centered AI, Bridging the Humanities, Social Sciences, and Technology Showcase and networking reception. She's got to pick up kids, so she can't stay for the networking part of today. But again,
He's also on the task force, yes.
Yes, my next sentence. It is now my pleasure to turn the platform over to our event moderator, Mohammed, who served in the University AI and Innovation Policy Working Group this year and has the undeniable pleasure of introducing today's speakers. You will notice that where's Heather? Right in the back. Okay. He has assistance from Heather. for the unenviable responsibility of timekeeping for these short-form TED Talk style presentations before ushering us into the networking component of today's event. So please join me in welcoming Mohammed to the podium.
Thank you, Dean Ardis. Good afternoon and welcome again to our Human-Centered AI event. As the Dean has mentioned, we're all thrilled today, and I am especially thrilled to help serve as MC for today's presentations. We have a fantastic lineup from our college, so proud of, and I'm excited to hear from each one of them, as I'm sure you all are. As Dean Ardis mentioned, we have planned a sort of a brief TED-style presentations for you today, and we will move quickly between each one. Given this format, we will not be taking questions in between each speaker. Once all presentations conclude, you will have the opportunity to engage with the speakers on a one-on-one, sort of dive deeper into the topics presented during our network reception. Our first speaker is Eileen Rosler. Eileen is assistant professor in our Department of Psychology. She is a researcher in the field of human automation and focuses on the complex challenges stemming from interactions with technologies such as AI and robots. Eileen's presentation is Mind Meets Machine, the challenge of human-AI synergy. Please join me in welcoming Eileen Rosler to the podium.
All right, thank you very much for this nice introduction. It's my pleasure to meet you all, but I actually have to say my field is already investigating the topic of human-machine interactions since decades. In fields like aviation, medicine, or the process industry, we have a long history of human-system collaboration, and the goal was always to enable synergy. So how can humans, together with systems, achieve performance that they would have never achieved alone? So is AI just old wine in new bottles? Because for the human operator in my field, it doesn't look that different. The output you receive, not really. Our early concepts were really focused on failures of systems, meaning whenever an error occurred that the human was able to overwrite it, not be too complacent, and more or less beware of an automation bias, so just following the automation. Right now, we have systems that even outperform really experienced human experts. And with this, we have in expert domains the problem that AI systems and humans together do not reach synergy, but a wonderful German term I'm introducing all of you to, verschlimmbessern. That means, and it's impossible to say it in English, with the best possible intentions, the human makes everything worse. Unfortunately, there's a growing research body showing that this is happening more and more commonly with novelly highly performant AI systems. And this here is a call for action. We have to enable every human to understand why a system recommendation can be trusted and why, or if not, it can be relied on. And we can only achieve this with a human-centered system design, including transparency, explainability, and the option for verifiability. And with this, I actually just want to end the call with humanities matter. It's not okay to just develop systems that are better performing and better performing and better performing. It's great, don't get me wrong, it's really great. But the human in the loop is deciding if this interaction will work out. So if you want to have the human in the loop, you have to design systems for the human. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Eileen. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Phillips. She's also an assistant professor in our psychology department. Her expertise is in human interaction with robots, autonomous systems, and related technologies like augmented and virtual reality. She studies how we can design these systems to be better partners and teammates for people. Elizabeth's presentation is Making Moral Machines: How People will come to trust machines' social and moral decision making. Please help me welcome Elizabeth Phillips to the podium.
Wonderful. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Phillips, and I like to say that broadly, the work that comes out of my lab concerns a central question, and that question is, what does it mean for robots and other autonomous machines to be human-like? And we mean that both in the literal sense, we mean how they're designed and how they appear human, but we also mean it in the figurative sense. So we think a lot about whether or not they behave or act or even feel in human-like ways. And we also mean in human-like, that can also include things like whether or not their behavior aligns with human value systems, like their norms, social and moral norms. In our particular work, we think that this is a particularly interesting question and one that the behavioral sciences are really uniquely poised to address. I'm curious, actually, what you all think about the robots that you may have seen trundling around our campus today and whether or not you think of them as social or even moral in nature. So one of the reasons why this is a particularly important question is because people are no longer asking whether or not robots will be included in social contexts. In fact, we're already seeing them being included in places in service sectors, in hospitals, as astronauts, but we're also seeing them perform roles as caregivers and these more socially sensitive contexts. So a critical need that we like to address is, we would say, what is a critical need for these robots to have is something called norm competence. Norm competence is this idea that these machines can understand, follow, and prioritize the norm systems of the communities in which they'll be embedded. But there is a critical challenge aside from just computationally implementing norms in machines, which some of our collaborators have actually made some progress in doing. A central challenge to getting robots to adhere to norms is that norms conflict with one another all the time. So humans handle these types of situations a lot. So a popular example that I like to give is in safety critical contexts, I might speak to you in ways that are very direct or terse, and in other contexts might be seen as impolite. But I prioritize the safety norm, but at the expense of the politeness norm. So a critical question then becomes, what do we do in these inevitable situations where some robots need to violate some norms some of the time? We need to be able to give them tools for mitigating the problems that come with that. So my colleague Eileen did a lovely job of mentioning explainable systems and explainable AI. We take some of that work one step further, and we talk about justifiable systems and justifiable decision making. So we would argue that it's not enough for robots just to tell you what they did, but we want them to tell you why they did it. What are the norms that were upheld in the moral and social decisions that they were engaging in? So our lab seeks to answer those questions, and we have some excellent results that show that when robots do justify their social and moral decision making, it can help people think of them as being trustworthy. We are making some progress in computationally implementing those, and we think that this is a critical step forward in making socially and morally relevant machines that will be embedded in our everyday lives. So I'll stop there. I'm very hopeful and looking forward to your questions. You'll actually hear from one of my students later, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Joining us now is Steve Gladys. Steve is CEO of SGLP and author of 28 books. Yes, 28 books. And 2 of them are novels, and the remainder of them are on leadership and communication topics. He is a senior scholar in George Mason Center for the Advancement of Well-Being, a former FBI special agent, and a decorated veteran in the United States Marine Corps. Semper Fidelis. Semper Fidelis. He will be focusing on how to reboot your career. Please join me in welcoming Steve Gladys.
Thank you very much. So the original title was Pimp Your Career. So they made me change it to make it a little bit nicer. My jobs are as such that I teach leadership here at the university, mostly to corporate groups at this point in my life. And the other part of my job is I'm an executive coach. And if you know executive coaches, they listen a lot, they don't give you advice, and then they charge you a lot of money. Okay, so I'm going to do the opposite today. I'm not going to charge you anything, and I'm going to give you advice. I'm going to give the same advice that I give my own clients. And believe me, I was getting between 5 and 10 requests a day when this whole craziness started. So there's a lot of people out there very concerned about what do I do next? What do I do now that I've been laid off? That kind of thing. And so what I want to do is kind of combine this human element and how you use AI with the human element, because it takes both. You're not going to get, I had this one guy come to me. He said, I've sent out 2,000 letters this year, 2,000 resumes. He said, I haven't gotten one interview. I said, by the time you got to 200, didn't it strike you that this strategy wasn't working? And now I knew why he didn't have a job. But anyway, we finally got him a job. But the whole point is that there's this union between the human part of this thing and the use of AI, and more and more we can use it to find jobs. So let me talk about a couple things. Number one, we tell people, go to LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn right now, you're probably not on this planet anymore in terms of getting a job. And look at not only your number one folks, because that's where everybody goes. They all go looking for jobs, talking to their number one contacts. Go to the 2s and 3s, because loose contacts are more likely to find you jobs than your current group. So you want to reach out to as many groups as you can farther away from you. There's a lot of research and theory on loose contacts. That's where you're most likely to find your jobs. So we tell them that first. Go update it. Start reaching out quickly as you can. Then I tell folks, do what's called informational interviews. Anybody ever hear of informational interviews? There you go. We got a few smart people here. Okay, well, the rest of you are not dumb, but I'm not saying that. But the point is that informational interview is this. You call somebody up who's working a job that you might be interested in, not to get a job, but to get advice. To get advice, not ask for a job. When you ask people for a job in a time like this, they go like this, and they give off adrenaline, right, and cortisol, because they're defensive. When you ask them for advice, what do? Give off oxytocin, feel good, a little dopamine, and just a touch of serotonin. I mean, they feel pretty good about life when you ask them for advice, because what you're doing is elevating their status. And everybody likes to have their status elevated. There's a lot of research on neural leadership by a fellow that if you're interested, I'll tell you more about him later. We tell people, ask for 15 minutes, call them up, set up the interview. At 15 minutes, stop the interview. Stop it dead. Say, listen, I want to respect your time, sir. Thank you so much. If the person that you're doing the interview with says to you, now let's talk some more, you are now in a job interview. And it happens all the time. Do 10 to 15 of these during normal times. 10 to 15, you'll find a job. Really. Now it's about 25. You just need to market yourself more. That's the most powerful method of finding a job of any that I know. And I've written on this topic if you're interested. In fact, my wife says I'll never have an unpublished thought. So, all right. Let AI do the laundry and the dishes. I hate doing the laundry and the dishes and all that stuff at home. So this is what you let AI do. Let AI write your resume, rewrite your resume 1,000 times. If they needed 250 words, they needed 100 words, just put it and say, give it to me in 100 words, give it to me in 30 words. Give me a summary of it, put it at the top. You can have it do all that sort of stuff. You can also have it match job descriptions in keywords, because you don't want those keywords in there, otherwise it doesn't make it through the system. You can have it do all that kind of stuff. There's no end to the way you can use it. You can use it to post things on Facebook. You can use it to write 20 posts on LinkedIn to show that you're active on LinkedIn. It's an amazing proposition. AI will help you do interviews. It will actually interview you you can actually interview AI and say, be an interview, corporate interviewer, and interview me for this job, and it will actually interview you. You have to type, and even that will be changing rapidly. But you can actually use it as a panel interviewer, as an individual interviewer. We tell people, if you get a chance for an interview, always do it in person. Always do it in person. Secondly, Zoom. Thirdly, phone. Fourthly, I don't know. smoke signals, or whatever, anyway. Last tip here before we send you forth is always follow up with an email or a text right the day of or the morning after, always. But here's the magic. Send a snail mail handwritten thank you note right away. It'll take a week or two or maybe sometimes 3 weeks to get there. But when it gets there, it's the most convincing piece of documentation you can get. People know it takes you a lot of time to find a stamp, write it out, and send it. Bob Cialdini did research on this and found out that and this is for the fundraising folks, that when fundraising letters came out and there was a sticky note by the dean or whoever, and a little note on the sticky note, it went up like 19%. The amount of money went up like 19%. Unbelievable when you think of it, because people really realize that you took extra time to kind of write this note out. So simple stuff, but that note is very, very important. And finally, I would say, if somebody helps you along the way, for God's sake, tell them you got a job. Fill them in, because you're going to come back to them again. And go forth and reboot or pimp your career, whatever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Such an inspirational speech. And now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Douglas Amon. Doug is an associate professor of writing and rhetoric in our English department. He's also a senior editor and publisher of Kairos, maybe Kairos, I mean, it's a journal of rhetoric, technology, and pedagogy. His current research interests include the affordance and constraints of composing with generative AI, LLMS, new media scholarship, teaching in digital environments, and video games as sites of composition. His presentation today is Critical Literacies in AI in Digital Writing Instruction. Please help me welcome Douglas Amon.
All right, thank you. Yeah. So, I'm going to tell you just a quick little story to start off. I was teaching a technical writing class in fall of 2022. And we looked at a range of different tools that said, hey, we're going to make life easier for the writer. We're going to do things for them. They're generative AI-based tools. And my students reviewed several of these tools. And at the end, we wrote a big report that said, these tools are all terrible. Right? They actually will do damage to your work, and they will make it harder for you to get your work done. And then a month later, ChatGPT exploded, and everybody said, like, wow, this stuff is great. And we all looked at people going like, what are you talking about? This is the same technology we just looked at that is, in fact, terrible. But now it's in a chatbot, right? Which makes a huge difference. And so I wrote up this description of this assignment because I thought it might be useful for other people and published it in this thing called Text Gen Ed, which is one of the first books of like assignments for classes using AI, right, in a broad range of different kind of writing contexts. But this got me thinking about like, well, why are some people all in on the hype? Why are they believing things that are clearly untrue, like when the CEO of Google says AI is more important than electricity in terms of moving humans forward? I'm like, there is no possible way that is true. Also, AI is not very good at doing most of the things they claim it's good at, right? And so for me, my interest became, how do I get students to understand as a critical literacy how these things work and how they don't work, and what they can use them for and what they shouldn't use them for, right? And if they really fully understand how they work at the kind of center, they're designed to make human-sounding language and output that. They're not designed to make correct language, right, or information that is true. They're designed to make words that sound like human words. And as students understand this, they can start saying like, oh, this is where it's going to help me, this is where it's not going to help me, right? And so my colleague, former colleague, Nupur Ranade and I, we did a special issue of Computers and Composition, which is one of the earliest pieces in writing studies to tackle this, because people are saying like, oh, our jobs aren't going to go away. AI is going to replace teachers. AI is going to replace writers into various jobs. Now, I've been talking to a lot of employers who employ writers, and they're like, no, that's not true. Because AI cannot actually replace the writers, because A, it can't do anything without being told what to do, and B, you need to have expertise as a writer to evaluate the output. If you do not have expertise to evaluate the output, then you get problems, right? And so, just as a quick note, This is the Columbia Journalism Review put out AI search as a citation problem. It will cite all sorts of things that aren't true when you're using the research tools that are out there now, right? And one of the big challenges there is that the ones that you pay more money for are more confidently incorrect. So it's really hard to convince them they're wrong and actually get good value out of them, right? And I think we'll see as more and more companies start saying, oh, we'll just replace people with AI, they're going to realize, like, no, we're going to bring people back in to evaluate the outputs because they're producing stuff that's not right. BBC also said the AI chatbots are unable to accurately summarize news, which maps onto what we found back in 2022 when AI systems couldn't really summarize technical documents. Well, they can't even summarize simple news documents without adding things that don't exist to those news items, right? And people say, like, well, things are getting better, things are getting better. These two reports are both from last month, right? It's not like we can actually see this huge, they are getting better, right? They can do certain things better. But I think it's really important for us as faculty, as people in industry, to help students especially, and people who are going to be working in these industries, understand what the spaces are where they're going to be helpful, like for brainstorming. And I like the idea of, like, tell it to be a reviewer and interviewer, right? As Steve just said, like, and have it interview you and give it questions back, right? You can have a 24/7 tutor available where you're always bouncing ideas off of. These are not bad things. I'm not saying don't use AI. I do have colleagues who are saying, like, really we should push back against teaching AI at all in writing studies and kind of refuse it. And I don't fall into that camp. I say, I think we need to teach the critical literacy approaches to AI in order to figure out how to use it well, right? So those are kind of my stances on these things, and I'm going to continue. And just a quick plug also, I feel like I'm just plugging all my stuff, but this is kind of giving you the context of, like, where I'm coming from and how I'm doing the work here. My colleague Newport and I also have a book coming out, Composing with AI, which is going to be a digital open access book so people can read about how lots of different people are thinking through and struggling with these same issues of where do we use AI and how do we teach students to use it really, really well. Some really fascinating stuff in there, talking about multimodal AI, producing images, working with things about how we get AI to recognize and reproduce different kinds of style, right? So writing styles in particular. And there are, of course, like, how do different journals and different avenues for publication, how are they thinking about AI? Are we allowed to use AI as faculty? Answer, no, right? Should we use it for peer review? Also no, right? But I mean, where are the places where we can use it and where we can't use it, and how do we evaluate that? So this might be less than 4 minutes, but I'll go ahead and yield the rest of my time and be happy to talk about this stuff for hours and hours with the rest of you later. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Doug. Joining us now for our next presentation are Lincoln Mullen and Deepthi Morali. Lincoln is director of our college's Roy Rosenzweig Center for History and New Media, a research center which creates websites, podcasts, educational resources, data-driven histories, and other open access digital work to democratize history. He is also a professor in our History and Art History department, and he is a historian of American religion and the 19th century United States, and often uses computational methods for text and maps. Deepthi is also an assistant professor in our History and Art History department. She's an art historian of South Asia and a digital public historian as well. Her research examines decorative arts made of wood, ivory, and cotton in littoral South India, mainly in the 18th and 19th centuries. Deepthi is currently working on a digital public history project that traces the history of striped and checked cotton textiles in 18th century southeastern India and used by communities of color in the greater Caribbean region. Their presentation is from historical records to data sets, case studies using AI from US and South Asian history. Please join me in welcoming Lincoln Mullen and Deepthi Morali.
Good afternoon, everyone. Have you thought about how you're going to enter the historical record? Don't worry, I'm not asking you to confront your own mortality this afternoon, but think about it for a moment. How are your notes, your papers, your documents, all those kind of things? Are future historians going to look at those? I have a box of letters. My grandmother wrote me one letter per week, every week that I was in college, and I have that box in my basement. And this summer, I went into the into the basement, and the water was pouring down from the kitchen up above right onto the box. Luckily, all the letters survive, but just think of what would happen in another 10 years. You have an ungrateful grandchild that doesn't keep the letters. All the records start to disperse and they start to disappear. But don't worry, most of you are going to be a part of the historical record because unless you evaded the US Census Bureau, you filled out a census form. And that's how most human beings enter the historical record. Not in letters or newspapers or things like that. Most people enter the historical record as numbers. Now, numbers can be dehumanizing, but they can also be a way for us to understand the patterns of social relations and the lived experiences of many more humans that never left a document behind, but were counted by some kind of a census or a commercial record or something along those lines. So Dr. Murley and I are going to talk about two different projects at the Roy Rosenzweig Center. Now, unfortunately, both of these were NEH funded, and we recently learned that along with 1,000 other programs, $300 million across the country, that funding has been suddenly pulled. But nevertheless, we will persist with these projects, and we're working out a route forward with them. But we're excited to share with you some of the ways that we're bringing to life historical records where human beings entered the historical record in a quantitative way. So, Deepthi?
I'm going to read off a paper because I'm a rambler and I will be here all night if left to my own devices. So, Mohammed, thank you for that introduction. I am an art historian and a public historian, digital public historian. So what does that really mean? I basically study objects, specifically in my case, those that were made in 18th and 19th century southern India, and then kind of see how these objects went around globally and reflects in systems of power, colonialism, environmental change, and those sorts of things. So really looking at objects and objects interacting with humans across space and time. At Mason, my project Connecting Threads, Mohammed kind of briefly introduced it. It's actually about lower caste Indian weavers who produced these textiles in 18th and 19th century southern India, and then they were exported through various colonial traders to the US and the Caribbean, and they were used by free and enslaved women of color and largely black communities across these regions as a way of accessorizing themselves in a period where they were restrained from wearing hats and other types of accessories in both Caribbean and in the US. So here, my research is really something that feels like looking at a needle in a haystack, because we are specifically looking at these check textiles called Madras handkerchiefs that were used by a large swath of people, but usually the people that Lincoln mentioned who exist as numbers mostly in the records. So really it's like digging deep. We have gathered thousands of archival pages in our project from 7 different archives from US and Europe. A lot of them are in different languages, English, French, Spanish, and Dutch. We include ship logs, newspaper ads, lists, legal records, business documents, a lot of different types of documents that we look at. And then we are looking at all these as undigitized documents. And this poses a particular type of trouble for those studying histories of the Global South. And the challenges are twofold. One is geographically accessing these archives that are often in Euro-American institutions as part of their colonial records. So getting there is a problem. But also, as Lincoln just said, we have funding and staffing issues on projects like these. Because they are also not digitized, they are also not available to do these large computational models that you can otherwise do as computational historians of the US or the Europe. So there is the lack of digitized data, and when digitized data exists, there's so much of it that we can't make sense of it. So in my case, AI lets me use, I've done a pilot, so I'm still working on this, but AI does help us do research in Global South better in 4 different ways. In one way is that it just helps transcribe and create data sets pretty quickly. I did a pilot of about 125 pages from the British East India Company textile records last semester in under 50 hours. It would have taken me months to process those pages if I was doing this manually. So it is really helpful in getting work done quicker, but it's also easier now to build these data sets that makes this large swaths of data access to a larger number of scholars, so that starting point of having data does not become a problem anymore. So in our case, we look at a lot of records, and these records, we're just looking for Madras handkerchief, but we know that there's a lot of global textile trade data in there that we can now make accessible to other people who might want to look at for other textile studies, right? So that is one of the reasons why I would like to use AI in my work. The last one thing I'll kind of talk about, I'm trying to look at the time, is that it really does democratize access to data. A lot of our records live in Western institutions because colonialism. We have objects in Western institutions, colonialism. But the thing is, these histories belong to the global South as well. And a lot of scholars and researchers don't get access to these records because of the geographic restrictions I mentioned earlier. So in order to make these viable data for scholars across the world to look at, we do need to democratize access, and AI is one of the ways in which we can actually do this. And I hope Lincoln can talk more about how exactly to use the data sets.
So Deepthi has shown us how you can use AI to go from a handkerchief to understanding global trade patterns. With the American Religious Ecologies Project, what we were working on is trying to understand the religious diversity in the United States roughly a century ago. A century ago was an exciting time in American religious life. The fundamentalist modernist controversy was reshaping American religion on conservative and liberal divides. The Pentecostal movement was just beginning, so charismaticism, speaking in tongues, miraculous healings, things like that were beginning. There was the Great Migration was leading African American Christians up out of the South and into urban cities. It's a wonderful time to study American religion. And in 1906, 16, 26, and 36, the federal government took a census of religious bodies. So not individual church members, but of congregations and other religious bodies like that. Yes, they were all like a bunch of white Protestants, and they tried to squish everybody into a white Protestant kind of a mold. They explicitly left out Muslims, which we're working to redress, and they basically tried to shape everybody in that way. But the 1926 Census of Religious Bodies is the single biggest data set for American religion that can ever exist for the period before the World War II. Somebody could imagine going out and creating some records of those things now, but for the historical record, we can't go back and remake data or whatever. We only have what the past created, and so we have 232,154 pieces of paper, one for each congregation across the country. Now, we have successfully digitized all of those. We're putting those up online. The difficulty is, how do you actually, remember all those human beings who enter the historical record as numbers? How do you get the numbers off of the digitized images? Well, we have had a small army of undergraduate transcribers working on those for the past 5 years. Students love working on the project. They get exposed to the past. They learn their work alongside working historians. But at the same time, transcribing numbers is maybe not anybody's particular idea of fun. And so what we have been able to do is pilot a program where we are working on transcribing those records using generative AI, and then comparing them to the records that the students have already transcribed. So we promised to the NEH that we would transcribe something like 20,000 of those 200,000 records. Now we think, using AI, we'll be able to do the complete data set and thus, create that final form, which will give us a comprehensive picture of American religion a century ago. But what about the poor student workers? Are they going to lose their jobs? No, that's not what we're talking about here. I know there's a lot of concern culturally about where jobs will be lost with AI and so forth, but what we are using this to do is to redirect that human effort towards understanding as opposed to the more mechanical aspects of historical research. So for example, we've had students track down what were these individual congregations, what were their neighborhoods like, who were their pastors, what were their membership likes in that way. And so that additional ability that we have lets us not just create the data set, but find the stories and the interpretive angles on it that really let us understand the full scope of American religious diversity. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lincoln. Thank you, Deepthi. We have now come to our final presentation. It's by Andres Rosero. Andres is a doctoral candidate in our psychology department. He works in the Applied Psychology and Autonomous System Lab, or ALPHAS Lab, as it is known on campus. And his work there applies psychological principles in the development of human-robot interactions. His research focuses on examining how humans perceive robots and autonomous agents in complex and morally ambiguous situations. His presentation today is Robot Deception, Implications for Human-Robot Interactions and Product Design. Please join me in welcoming Andres Rosero.
Picture this, early afternoon on a Friday. Work is done and the house is all yours. You sink into your couch. You turn on the TV, go to your favorite TV show and press. Someone just knocked on the door. This is not a drill. You check your Ring camera and, oh no, it's a salesman. Vibe ruined. That is, until your robot house cleaner comes to the door. The salesman asks, is there anyone home? And your robot, knight in shining armor, states plainly, I'm sorry, no one's home, and promptly shuts the door. Now wait, you might be thinking, did my robot just lie? But more importantly, you're thinking, now I don't have to leave my couch. As robots become present in social spaces, they must follow the unwritten social rules that we expect others to follow. Sometimes, like in the salesman example, the robot must violate one social norm, honesty, in order to prioritize another, maintaining your comfort. In these cases, robots must deceive. Deception is any behavior in which a robot must violate one social rule in order to prioritize another. Crucially, deception is not inherently harmful. What makes deception harmful is not the action, but the intention behind the action. Yes, my robot lied to the salesman, but I wasn't going to talk to him anyway. If robots are going to be introduced in these social spaces, we must understand how robot deception affects our desire to use them. My research explores robot deception by examining 3 key robot design decisions that the research claims to be deceptive. The first, external state deception, refers to how robots talk to people. The second, hidden state deception, refers to robots acting human in order to conceal machine-like abilities. The final, superficial state deception, refers to a robot that feels even though they have no capacity to actually feel. My dissertation work is among the first to quantify people's perceptions of robot deceptive behaviors. The findings of my study showed that in some cases, people actually approve of robot deceptive behaviors and can even provide positive intentions for these behaviors. In other cases, robots' behaviors have been shown to not only not been approved, but they also extend the deceptiveness to other third-party entities, such as developers and owners of the robots. My work after publication has been featured in multiple news outlets, highlighting public concern for robots intentionally designed to deceive us. As robot developers aim to make robots for commercial use, they must pay careful attention to how they talk, how they act, and how they feel. Intentions matter, and if these intentions are not approved by us, the consequences could be catastrophic. Who exactly robots serve and support in commercial spaces is very important for us to consider. Before I leave, I'd like to present one twist to the earlier example. Picture this. You've just been laid off unexpectedly. As you leave the building, you stop by your boss's office and ask them why you were laid off. You knock on the door and a robot answers. The robot states plainly, I'm sorry, your boss is not in the office. In this case, who exactly is the robot serving? Before I leave, I am graduating in the summer, and I am on the job hunt. And as a very intelligent, as a very intelligent man once told me, I'm more than happy to get informational interviews about 15 minutes. And anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andres. That was impressive. So on that note, please help me acknowledge each of our presenters today. Now that we have benefited from these thought-provoking topics, and I hope we continue by connecting further, our speakers will be located, as you could see them, at different tables throughout this room, and you will have the opportunity to talk with them and ask questions during your network reception. I know Doc said he can talk for hours, so take advantage of that, because as we have reinforced today, it is our human connection and it's our expertise that is the undercurrent that powers both transformative and ethical artificial intelligence. Thank you so much.